Okay, good evening, Rabotai. We're going to discuss tonight. Today was Gimel Cheshvan, the third of Cheshvan. What does that signify? It signifies this is the death anniversary of MARAN, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef Zatzal, our great rabbi, our great teacher, the eminent authority of the generation. He passed away on this day. This was 7 years ago today. He passed away, yeah. So we have to always try to give a class to remember his great example, his great legacy that he left over for us. As all Jews know, whoever was close to him or whoever heard about him, there are books also written about him, the rabbi. There are probably about 10 books already, biographies that have been written about the rabbi, his life, his deeds, his legacy, his great accomplishments that he made. So we have to talk a little bit about that because I was there personally for 15 years around his circle, right, in his inner circle there, praying with him, being in his house, going to his lectures over there. So we spent a lot of time with the rabbi, a lot of experiences that we have, to tell over. But one of the things, which was the most striking thing about the rabbi, is that I used to go into his minyan, the shul over there that he had. He built like a little shul under his house. He had like an apartment, so he lived on the second floor. So he built a shul on the first floor because he wanted to be very close. He was getting older. He didn't want to go out all the time outside and go to different shuls and blah, blah, blah. So he built a shul downstairs. So over there, the first time that they opened the shul was on the high holy days, and they invited me to come there. I was invited. They told me, they came to me, they said, Rabbi Danielov, the rabbi wants to invite you, to come over there to pray with him on the high holy days. They said, you're going to be sitting in the rabbi section. There was only three seats over there in the rabbi section. They put me over there. So I was very happy. I said, okay, I'm coming. Don't worry about it. consider it done. I'm coming over. So I came over for that Rosh Hashanah. That was the first year that he opened up his shul. And we prayed over there. And so, one of the things that we always used to be flabbergasted about, which amazed, was the rabbi, had some kind of like a sixth sense, They call that, in Hebrew, they call that Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. So we know that the rabbi had that. Like one guy who used to pray there was a regular there. He was the rabbi's neighbor. I was also his neighbor for several years as well. So what happened was he would tell me, when people come in over here, each one that comes into the minyan, says the rabbi reads them. I see, he reads them, What does that mean, reads them? He can understand who they are, what they are. He knows already what's going on with them. So the question is, how did really anybody know that the rabbi had Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration? How do you know something like that? That he had such a thing like this? So the answer is very simple, from me anyway, right? That there is actually a midrash, Tana Dever Eliyahu. It says over there in Tana Dever Eliyahu, how does a person get Ruach HaKodesh? The truth is that there's different versions of this method of getting Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration. What does that mean? You get information that people don't have logically or from books. You get it from heaven, Some angel comes and gives you information, gives you divine inspiration. That's what it's all about. So the rabbi had that. We knew that he had it. We felt it. But question is how? So it says in that midrash, very simple, There's also Gemara in Avodah Zarah, Masechet Avodah Zarah. It uses a different methodology to get Ruach HaKodesh. It talks about building your character traits and becoming more devoted to the service of God, going from one step to another, one plateau to another, until you go up all the way, and then you reach level of Ruach HaKodesh. That's one way to become stronger in your observance, in your devotion to God, in your character traits, perfecting them, so forth and so on, until you become totally devoted to the service of God, and then you get Ruach HaKodesh, you get that divine inspiration. That's one way. There's also Midrash, as I said, Tana Dever Eliyahu. Over there, he says something else. He says that the way you get divine inspiration is very simple. You open up the Torah. What does that mean? You start reading the Bible, the Chumash, 5 books of Moses. Then you read the prophets, right? Then you read the Ketuvim, the writings, the Holy Scriptures. You read those, and then you go into Halacha, Midrash, Agadah, right? All these things, which are the basic elements of the Torah that everybody has to study, especially if you want to be a rabbi, obviously. You have to study all these things, right? Unfortunately, a lot of people don't do that. But anyway, the point is that it says once you do that, you study all these disciplines, and you spend most of the time of your day learning Torah, devoted to Torah study, and only a little bit of time with like mundane tasks, like making some money or doing some business, or you do like on the side, a business or whatever, some kind of income, some kind of sustenance for yourself. You do that on the side, but your main goal, your main essence in life is studying Torah and being devoted to God. So once a person does that, he learns all these things that we mentioned, says right away he gets Ruach HaKodesh, right away he gets divine inspiration. That's the way it is, right? So can you imagine? You get that because you become devoted to the service of God in one way or another, as we said, right? Either by becoming very disciplined and very devoted, that's the one way, and the other one is what you study all the elements of the Torah, and to get that and become devoted to the Torah. That's the other way. So obviously the rabbi had that, because the truth is, right, that the rabbi was the most knowledgeable person in Torah in this generation. But not only that, he was the most knowledgeable in many generations before as well. How many generations are we talking about, right? What are we talking about? The truth is, right, that there are different versions of this. How many generations you have to go back to find a scholar who was on the level of the rabbi, Maybe 2, maybe 4, maybe 5, maybe 10 generations. So the truth is, right, that some say that from MARAN Bet Yosef, who was 500 years ago, wrote the Shulchan Aruch, Jewish law. He wrote that book, the Jewish Code of Law. They say from there, at that time, nobody was like him from there 500 years ago until today. There's one version. Some say, no, it goes back like 1,000 years, from the Rambam. From the time of the Rambam, there was nobody like the rabbi. Can you imagine such a thing like this? So it's like 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, there was even one rabbi, who's still alive, was a Rosh Yeshiva, Rabbi Mazuz. You know what he said, right? He said that the neshama of the rabbi, he said, comes from the Tanaim, these are the authors of the Mishnah, which are like 2,000 years ago. He says neshama goes back from there, his soul is from those rabbis. So can you imagine, that this is the way they were judging the rabbi? So the question is, how did he get to the level like that people judge him in such a great, they hold him such high esteem like that? What did he do? I mean, he was a flesh and blood human being like everybody else, no? So the truth is very simple, that from the time that he was a young kid, he became totally devoted to Torah study, nothing else. He was like, non-stop in Torah. Every free waking moment that he had, right, instead of doing all kinds of nonsense, even they say when he was in school, everybody was going out to recess, and playing ball, some soccer, some things like that. He was sitting and learning, even at recess time. This is the way he started out, the rabbi. He was devoted to study all the time, from his teenage years onward. So what happened was that, in the end, he turned out to be the biggest scholar. What does that mean? The scholarship that he had was really, really amazing. What was a scholarship? We're talking about a person who has a library of like 50,000 books, 50,000 books. So what does this mean, 50,000 books? I don't think there was anybody ever in the history of Judaism that had that many Torah books in his library. Probably never was such a thing like that. As far as we know, there's no documented case of something like that. So how did that work? The rabbi couldn't even fit his books into his apartment because it was too vast, the library, You can't fit it into one house. So what happened? How did he have it? He had like several apartments, like scattered all over Jerusalem, and his library was scattered in those places. He couldn't fit it into one place, to one house. That's how big the library was. And he was very vehement, to guard that library. Nobody should touch those books until they get permission, and they have to return it, right? They have to, you can take it, on my permission, but you have to return it also. Make sure you return it. That's the way he was. The rabbi was very, very tight with those books. So the reason why he got this great merit to learn all these books like that is because he was totally devoted, like with his time. Every waking moment, was precious to him. Was devoted to Torah. He also liked other things. He was also big. He was a big music aficionado. He was really into music. Not like us. We grew up with rock and roll. He grew up with Arabic music, so that was his love. He liked Arabic music. And he used to take those the Arabic music, and translate it into holy songs, and take their melodies and use them for all kinds of things. He was into this kind of stuff, but he was doing it, as like something on the side, because this is also a part of the service of God. You need music to serve God because it makes you happy. It makes you, gives you that happiness, that joy that you can serve God. I heard, by the way, some people told me, by the way, even that when he used to write his books, the rabbi, he had music going, at the same time, because that used to give him the proper, state of mind, joy, joyous mind, to get things, to get the juices flowing, and to write those books, to get the creativity going. So he liked music very, very much, like we all do, right? At least us, right? So that's the way he was. So, but nevertheless, his time was totally devoted to Torah. So I'll give you a couple of examples, and you understand, right? How much was the devotion of the rabbi, to every moment should be for Torah. So there's a story brought down, in one of the books that they wrote about him. Something amazing, right? Give you an example. What happened was that the rabbi, he was when he was younger, he was walking around Jerusalem, going from the house to the shul, going back from the yeshiva, blah blah blah. So what happened was that one night there was a blackout. In Israel, by the way, they're fairly common, the blackouts. Like all of a sudden, boom, everything goes black, and then it comes back like 15 minutes later, half hour later. The system over there is not so strong, not so stable. They're trying to improve it. They have done some improvements, but still, it's still, pretty shaky. So you get blackouts, like once a month or once every 2 months, 15 minutes, everything is out. It happens. So now what's the interesting thing? So the rabbi got blacked out, when he was studying. So what does he do? You may think, right, what are you going to do if he blacks out? You can't study because there's no light, So what are you going to do? Just wait for the light come back on? Okay, we'll wait 15 minutes. Meanwhile, we'll eat some, we eat some crackers, whatever, do something. No, so the rabbi, what did he do? When it blacked out, he went out into the street. There were some street lamps that were on. I don't know how that is, but the street lamps were still on. So he went out there, and he took his book, and he stood under the lamp and he continued to learn because he didn't want to waste that time that there was a blackout. You know what I mean? So what happened was that the people were coming at that time. They prayed Arvit in the shuls, prayed Arvit, the night prayer, and they were coming back home. So they saw the rabbi standing there, under the light, and learning, studying. So they passed by. So what happened was that the rabbi, so he passed by, and the light didn't come on all night. It never came back on. The blackout never came on all night. It was dark. So what happened was that the rabbi, in the morning, right now it's time for shachrit. The night is already over. 12 hours passed. Right? So what happens is that now these same Jews who were coming back from the shul at night were going now back for shachrit, for the morning prayers. You know what I mean? So what happens? They come out, it's like 6 o'clock in the morning. They used to pray very early in those days, right? So they used to pray very early. They come out 6 o'clock in the morning, and what do they see? The rabbi's still there, like 12 hours. He was standing there next to the light pole, He's just standing there. He stood there all night. Can you imagine the devotion that this requires? It's like unbelievable. You stand in the street, you have nowhere to sit, nothing to eat, nothing to drink. He was standing there, so they came back in the morning, he was still there. They said, this is the guy who was standing there before. When we came back at night, he was still there. So what happened was that once they heard this story, about the rabbi, there were some Ashkenazi rabbis over there, they heard about this. So what they said, right? They said, don't ever mess with this rabbi. Don't make fun of him, because if a person is so devoted to Torah, he can stand all night by a light pole, and study like that. He's a very, very special person. Don't mess with him. Hashem is on his side, God is on his side. That's the way he was. Also, something very similar, right? Another story that we heard regarding this quality that the rabbi had to be, so devoted to Torah study. What happened was one time when he was older already, this was like 50 years after that, 60 years after. So what happened was that the electrician came to the rabbi's house, to fix the electricity. Something was wrong. This is one of the most common problems, by the way, electricity in Israel. Electricians make a fortune over there because there's always issues going on. Whatever. So what happens? Right? The electrician comes over to the rabbi's house. He's fixing electricity. So he says, okay, tells the rabbi, he says, okay, rabbi, I'm done, I finished, I fixed everything. He says, but I have to do a test to make sure, everything is good. So he says, I have to shut off all the lights to do the test. Just for 1 minute, I shut off the lights. So the rabbi tells him, oh, okay, you have to shut off the lights. So he says, okay, wait 1 second, he says. So what does he do? He goes to the window, right, where there's a street lamp over there, so he can still study, with a street lamp, So he goes and like puts the book outside the window like this, so he can study. And then he tells the electrician, okay, now shut it off. Why? Because that minute, that he was going to shut it off, he didn't want to, lose that Torah time. What I mean? That's how devoted he was to Torah study. I can tell you also, right, I personally saw myself that when the rabbi would come, to do Brit Milah, because you know what it is, right, that there's a special segula, there's a special merit when a person has a son to bring a sandak, the godfather, the one who holds now Como was the godfather, but we're the but now he's the godfather. But there's the sandak, which they call the godfather, right? He's the one who holds the baby.
Yeah.
So it's there's a very big inyan, there's a very big issue there to bring somebody who's like a big chacham to hold the baby when they're doing the milah, because they say it affects him. It gives him like holiness. It gives him like some kind of a turbocharged, holy injection, right? So he turns out to be like very holy, the child. You know what I mean? So therefore, everybody wanted the rabbi, to come and to be the sandak, to be the godfather, whatever, right?
Not like my older one was a loser because my father was the sandak.
You're funny. You're funny. Okay, yeah, I have some stories to tell you about that, also about myself as well. Okay, so anyway, right? So a lot of people always, everybody wants the big rabbi to come and be sandak, So what happened was that I also, by the way, myself, two of my sons, I had the rabbi to be the sandak, because I was already there at that time. Two of my sons were born, right? Yeah, Ovadia.
Wow.
So I had two. He told two of my sons.
That's some honor.
And by the way, you should know that I was told by also somebody else, a friend of mine who was studying there in yeshiva. He said that I have like several sons. He tells me. He says, there were the sons that the rabbi held them, sandak, during. And he says, I have sons that the rabbi did not hold them. It just turned out that way. It didn't, depending on where they were, the situation, whatever. So he says, I can tell you the difference between them and them. It's like day and night. That's what he tells me. By the way, I see the same thing also with my children. The ones that had the zechut to be held by the rabbi, they turned out to be like totally something else.
You could say it's a coincidence.
It's not a coincidence. First, because the Torah teaches us that. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not a coincidence. But the interesting thing is that whatever Torah teaches you, you see it also in real life. You know what I mean? You see that. So that's exactly what happened. So what happened was that the rabbi used to come sometimes, and as a sandak, he was invited. So he would come to the synagogue, and he had to. So what happened was that they were late. They didn't show up yet. The whole entourage, the family wasn't there yet. So the rabbi comes early, punctual. And they're just, stuck in traffic somewhere, whatever. So what would he do? What do you think he would do, right? He'd sit there, look at the ceiling, count sheep. No, he would take a book right away, start learning. You know what I mean? He didn't want to waste any time. So if they came late, always there was a book there, to hold and to learn.
Would you say that in his lifetime he covered the whole Torah?
Not only that, he covered it like, many, many times as well, like many times over, right? For sure, there's no question about it. He told his son, Rabbi Yosef, the chief rabbi now, his son, he told him, he says, when I was 30 years old, he says, I already had like the whole Talmud in my head, like a microfilm, I could like move it around, page to page, like the shape of the page was memorized. The shape, the way it is here, the way it is, everything was memorized already. So I said, I have to flip it around like a microfilm, like do the whole Talmud by heart like that. But not only by heart, like go to page, like this page, that page, like move it around. PDF. You're like PDF, the whole thing. That's the idea. So this is the way the rabbi was, I can tell you also that he told us personally as well, that when we were in his yeshiva, he told us, he says, you should know one thing. He tells us that if you are standing by the bus stop, waiting for a bus, or something similar, he says you should be studying Torah over there. Don't just stand there and look at the sky. Oh yeah, I see the sun and the moon. I see the constellations. What are you looking at the constellations for? You should be studying at that time. You're waiting for a bus. You got time? You got free time. So he says you should know that a person who doesn't do that, right, he doesn't study when he's waiting for the bus. He's going to give judgment for that too. He's going to be judged for that. They didn't. Why? Because in Torah it says Vehagita bo yomam v'layla. In the Chumash. What does that mean? You have to be in the Torah, studying Torah, day and night, like constantly. So he will tell us, I don't know if there's a day, there's a time. As far as I know, there's no time which is not night or day, right? So therefore, you have to be studying all the time. This is what the Torah is coming to tell you. So if you're not studying by the bus stop, you got a problem. Same thing also he told us, by the way, something similar. He said that, I told the story over last year when I did this lecture about the rabbi. Last year was your site. So what happened was that, there's this, there's a story that, it slips my mind. Okay, so anyway, we'll get back to that, but what I wanted to say is that, as we said, right, that he said, the buses, right, I just remembered, it came back to me. So the way it was like this, right, when he was young, and he was a chief rabbi of Tel Aviv at that time, First he became chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, and then he became chief rabbi of all of Israel, the rabbi. So what happened was that he used to go, when he was chief rabbi of Tel Aviv, he would take the bus, pay for it himself, He didn't have a car. So he would take a bus and go around like all the surrounding towns, like the area of Tel Aviv, like Ramat Gan, and those areas right over there, all the center areas, the Merkaz, right? All the so he would go to all those towns, and these were like very secular areas, So he would knock on the doors over there, like strangers, go from door to door, knock on them, and tell them, oh, can I come in? I want to teach you some things about Judaism. He would go into their house and teach them. And they would tell them, oh, you have children? Did you enroll into yeshiva? I said, I'll help you to get them into yeshiva if you want. You have to send every child to yeshiva. So he would make sure that all the children get a yeshiva education, like this. He went door to door, can you imagine? Like a door-to-door salesman. Nobody's paying him for this. He's doing it on his own volition. Nobody had the chutzpah to do things like this, you know what I mean? The rabbi, he had the chutzpah to do things like this, just to knock on doors of strangers. Mm-hmm. So now the question is like this, right? Okay, that he did. I talked about that last year, but there's also another element over here. You know what the other element is? The other element is that when he was taking the bus, to get to these places, he was studying at that time. On the bus he was studying. So he used to tell us, he says, when I was on the bus, and I'm talking about the old buses, which were really like bad, like jumped up and down, like a kangaroo, boom, 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 like really bad shocks, like, ingredient, bach, 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 So it's hard to concentrate to study like that. You're being like jumping around like a pogo stick, But he says, and nevertheless, I was studying. He says, so he tells us, you also have to study when you're on the bus. Don't just look around, look at the walls, look at the advertisements, this and that, whatever. What are you looking at? Take a book and to read it. He says, that's the way you have to do. He himself, by the way, as he got more famous and more accepted, what happened was that he had, in the end of his life, towards the end of his life, like the last 20 years, somebody bought him a Mercedes, like S-Class, I'm talking about that one, the silhouette, the heavy one that was really heavy. We're talking about that model, right? It was like a very heavy one, like a Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
We're talking about the one after, the 80s, right?
After
yeah,
the 80s,
right, that one, So that model, the rabbi had that model, it was a white one. Somebody bought him one.
Okay.
And then what happened was that they broke into that car, thieves came, they broke in.
Yeah.
So then what happened was that there was one rich guy who owns like a BMW network of dealerships. He's already dead, but at that time he was alive. His name was Safra, Edmund Safra. He was like a rich Lebanese banker, he has banks also. Safra Bank, Manhattan, that's his.
Wow. That's
his family's banks, right. So he has also a chain of BMW dealerships. So he bought the rabbi like a 7 Series, So from that time, like every 2 years, he was getting a new 7 Series, And he was driving around in a BMW, like a white one, like a Snow White, whatever. So why do I mention to you this? Because they said, right, that this BMW was like a yeshiva, because he was studying in the back there. He had a little lamp in the back, right behind him. So he would turn on the lamp, he would study over there. What was he studying when he was in the BMW? He was studying the Tanakh, Bible, he was reading. Because you can't read something too complicated when you're in the car. You don't have concentration so well. So he used to read like, Bible, he was Tanakh. There was his Tanakh Siddur, Bible study. That's what he used to do when he was in the BMW. So they said, right? They used to say his BMW is like a yeshiva, Bet Midrash. It's like a study hall. That's how they used to say about the rabbi's car, right? That's the way it was. So he used to study wherever he was, right? Whatever it was. So that's exactly what the Torah teaches us. Right? You have to study whether you're on the road or whether you're sitting in your house, right? Whatever it is. Don't waste time with all kinds of nonsense, all kinds of chitter chatter, all kinds of wasted words. Pick up a book. Now we have, Baruch Hashem, we have computers, we have phones. The Torah is everywhere. Everywhere you turn, the Torah is right in front of you. So you have no excuse. That's what the rabbi told us. He says, you really have no excuse. This is the rabbi. This is the way the rabbi was. He was super, super devoted every moment of his life to being to Torah. And by the way, this was also reflected in something very interesting, which is that the rabbi was not really a fast reader. Like when I used to hear him reading, he read very slowly, actually. So then how do you manage to learn so much? So many books, So you know what the answer is? When you don't stop, and you just keep going all the time, you cover a lot more than you think, because there's so much time which is wasted in the day. So if a person is really like consistent with that, it just keeps going, doesn't stop. Every 2 seconds, something bothers him. You got some ring on the telephone, you got some, some message, some text, you got texted, you got SMS, you got this right over there, from over there, you got WhatsApp, you got this, whatever, everything is bothering you all the time. When you're like that, you have no time to study Torah, you have to be out of that, you have to be, sometimes you just got to close everything, and just get into the Torah without having any interruptions. That's the idea. Otherwise you can't get anything done with all these interruptions, the phone, the computer, this, that, all these kinds of distractions that we have today. That's the way it is. So the rabbi was able to overcome these things in order to become totally devoted to the Torah. So what happened was that he had like a tremendous discipline. He read very slowly. There's a story which is brought down regarding this, something amazing, right? Masechet Yevamot in the Gemara. It says in the Gemara that the story of Rabbi Akiva, So Rabbi Akiva was like, like a big hero like this also, like the rabbi, Al Shalom. Very similar. In his generation, he was the hero of that generation, the Torah hero, just like the rabbi was in our generation. So what happened was that Rabbi Akiva, they say something interesting about him, that when he was young, he was a worker. He was the son of a convert, His father was a convert. His name was Yosef, his father, right? Yosepi, His father was Yosef. He was a convert, his father. So Rabbi Akiva, he was Amaratz, he didn't know anything about Torah. He used to just work in the field. He was a worker, Mushakatsi, Chilosani, right? That's the idea. So he was working, and he was working in the field, and he didn't know nothing about Torah, zero. He didn't know how to read. Even reading he didn't know how to do. Right? So what happened was that he was working for a very rich man. He was like a billionaire at that time, His name was Kalba Savua. So Kalba Savua had a daughter whose name was Rachel, Rachel, whatever, right? So this Rachel, this Rachel, she put eyes on Rabbi Akiva, and he said, wow, this guy has a great character, he's just like he's just a very refined, very, very, very intelligent, just amazing character. So she said, you know what? She decided, I want to marry this guy, whatever. But she made a condition with him. She said, if you want to marry me, you have to promise me one thing. You're going to be studying Torah all the time, nothing else. No stock market, no bitcoins, right? No options, right? No, nothing like that, right? No futures, everything in the Torah you're going to be. If you want to marry me, that's the only on that condition I marry you. So what happened was that once so he said he agreed to it, right? Rabbi Akiva, he liked her, So he said, okay, fine, and she's the daughter of a billionaire. Can you imagine? She found a billionaire's daughter. So he hooks up with her. Because they get married, But Kalba Savua, the father, is very upset. He tells his daughter, right? Tells him, would you want to marry this bum? He's a lowly worker, He's a mushakatzia, What do you want to marry this guy for, He's a bum. He's a little bum. He doesn't even want to read, this guy. I want you to marry somebody who knows Torah, somebody who's learned, somebody who's sophisticated, educated. What did you bring me this guy for? That's what he told her. So he said, yeah, but he says, I have to tell you, he's an amazing character, and I think he has great potential, So I want to try with him. Can you imagine? So what happens is that he tells her like this: if you marry over my dead body, he says, if you marry this guy, I'm going to disown you. You're going to lose everything. Your inheritance with me. You're going to be kicked out of the house. I'm finished with you. He gave her like an ultimatum like this. Can you imagine? So what happened was that she didn't care. She was so devoted to this guy, to Rabbi Akiva. He said, "I'm marrying him anyway." So what happened was that once they got married, she was disowned from the family. No fortune, no nothing. Right? They couldn't even live there in his house. They were thrown out. So what happened was that they had to go and live in poverty. For the first many years that they were together, they lived in poverty. They didn't even have a bed to sleep on. That's how bad it was. So what happened was that after 24 years, of this kind of lifestyle, he goes to yeshiva to study. She's sitting at home, supporting the family by herself. He's not even there. He wasn't even there for 24 years. He wasn't home. He never came home. He was in the yeshiva studying. That's what Rabbi Akiva was. He was the Torah hero of that generation. Like that, right? So what happened was that Rabbi Akiva, after 24 years, he came back. Right? And all of a sudden, what they did? They publicized the newspaper, right? It was on Facebook, whatever. They said, "Oh, big rabbi's coming to town, You want to meet him? Come to this place, right, Town Square. He's going to be there, right, this day and day. Big rabbi, big chacham, get a blessing from him. Ask him some questions, blah, blah, blah." So, right, what happens is the Kalba Savua, who was the father-in-law, right, disowned them. He didn't know that this was his son-in-law. He didn't realize, He didn't know what happens with him. He disowned them, So he thinks it's just a big rabbi, some from somewhere. He doesn't know who he is. So he also comes there, to get a blessing from the rabbi, whatever. He comes over there. So he finally, confronts him. He says, "Wait, you're him, no?" So he tells him, "Yeah, I'm him." He says, "What did you expect?" He says, "What? Are you surprised that I became a big rabbi?" So he says, says, "What can I do?" He says, "I'm so sorry, He says, "If I would have known that you're going to become a rabbi like this, I never would have disowned you."
Yeah.
So, he wanted to annul the vow. He made a vow to never help this guy, to disown him. Mm-hmm. So he wanted to annul it. So what does he do, right? He goes to the rabbi annulled his vow. He told him like this. He has to express regret for what he did, right? So he tells him, "If you would have known that your son-in-law was going to become such a great rabbi like this, would you disown him?" So he says, "I promise you," he answered him, "I promise you, even if he would have been able to read a Mishnah, I wouldn't have disowned him. Even that he didn't know what to do. He didn't know how to read a Mishnah. This is the reason why I disowned him." So he opened up the vow, and he permitted him. So now what did he do? In the end, because he studied Torah for 24 years, Kalba Savua, when he passed away, he left all his fortune to Rabbi Akiva, everything, So he became a billionaire overnight. There was also other ways he got money from different sources, That's what happens when a person devotes himself to Torah. He gets money from everywhere, Money comes in, because Hashem gives him a blessing in the end. Even though he didn't work, he didn't do nothing, just because he toiled in Torah.
Yeah.
It says in the Gemara, Masechet Yevamot, Shisha Drachim Heshir Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva became rich in 6 ways. This was one of them. The Kalba Savua left all the fortune to Rabbi Akiva. What was the other way? What happened was that afterwards he took another wife. It seems like this lady died, Rachel. She passed away, whatever. So then he needed a different wife. So this time, who does he take? Do you know who he took the second wife? Right. So this was the wife of Turnus Rufus. We talked about this guy, this Roman, right?
Yes.
Yeah, like a Como kind of guy, Como. Yeah, like this guy. Turnus Rufus was Como's protege, right? So what happened is right that Turnus Rufus was a nasty guy, bad boy. He always used to chide Rabbi Akiva, like make fun of him. He always tried to embarrass him, put him down, everything like that. So they say they do bedu, like it was the worst of the worst. This guy. So what happened was that when he died, Rabbi Akiva married his wife. You know why? Because there's a whole story regarding that. You know what the story goes? The story goes like this, right? That Turnus Rufus was such a big rasha. He told his wife, he says, "You know what? I want you to go and do me a favor." He tells her, "What favor?" So he says, this Akiva, Rabbi Akiva, says he bothers me all the time. I can never beat him. Every time I try to to do something to him, to make some decrees, these zip codes cannot lock down. They have to lock down, Every time they always beat me, these Jews, I can never beat them, Then they come and they tell me, you're finished. You'll never like Dov Hiken, right? They tell us, you're finished. We'll pay you back on that. So what happened was that he says, every time I try to mess up with Rabbi Akiva, he always beats me. Every time I try to disprove his points, he always argues with me and defeats me. He says, I'm sick and tired of him already. He says. So he says, what am I supposed to do? How can I defeat this guy? What can I do to defeat him? So she tells him like this, the wife, Ubedus, So she tells him, says, I'll go and seduce him, I'm a very beautiful lady. I'll go and seduce him, and I'll get him to sin. Those Jews, they cannot do things like that. So, I'll go and seduce him. Don't worry, he says, I'll take care of everything, I'll finish him off for you. I'll assassinate him. I'll finish him off. So what happens is that she goes over there to Rabbi Akiva, beautiful outfit, nice, whatever. And she looks like, gorgeous, like stunning. So Rabbi Akiva sees her, So he did three things when he saw her, right? He laughed, ha ha ha, Chaitzina, ha ha ha. And then he cried, and then he did a third thing. You know what he did? He spit, pooh. So she sees all this, all this behavior. Says, what are you doing? Why did you laugh? Why did you cry? Why did you spit? What are you trying to do? She's coming there to the seduce him, and he's doing there all kinds of, shenanigans, like this, right? So what happens is that he tells him, he says, he tells him exactly the reason why he did all these three things, right? So he tells him, he says, the reason why I cried, he says, because you're such a beautiful lady, He says, I'm so sad that one day your body's going to rot in the ground, when you die. The beauty that you have is unbelievable, stunning. That's why I cried. So okay, so why did you laugh? Why did you spit? So he says the reason why I spit is because I was so attracted to you, He says I wanted to make some kind of rejection, So I spit. So he says why did you laugh? So he says the reason why I laughed is because he says I know, I can see in Ruach HaKodesh, like we said, right? Divine inspiration. He had Ruach HaKodesh also, he learned all the Torah. So he says, I can see that one day I'm destined to marry you. That's what he tells her. He says, I saw in a prophetic vision, Ruach HaKodesh, I'm destined to marry you one day. So she was shocked, So she couldn't even do the seduction, She was already so enraged with that with all that information. She was overloaded. He overloaded her, So she just walked away, whatever. So it was true in the end, right? What happened was that Tunis Rufus died, Gadawarda. So what happened was that he converted her and took her as a wife. So what happened was that all the fortune of Tunis Rufus, he was also a very wealthy man, like that, right? He was very wealthy. He got all the fortune of Tunis Rufus. So he got Kalba Salwa's fortune, his father-in-law, and also Tunis Rufus, he got that too. Yeah. So he got the fortune from many, many sides. That was only two of them. There's also others. I'm not going to get into those. It's not really related to us. But so what happened was like this, right? That the Gemara also, the Tosfot over there, asked a question in the Gemara we just described, right? The question is like this, right? That what's the story over here, right? That Rabbi Akiva, Kabba Savua didn't believe that he could become a big rabbi, because he was so ignorant. He was totally ignorant, Rabbi Akiva, didn't know how to read. So, as we said, right, that because of this, that there was a regret that he showed Kabba Savua, because he said, if I would have known, he's going to become a big rabbi like that, I wouldn't have disowned them. So this is the way he was able to annul the vow because of the regret that he had regarding this. So the Tosfot talks about this over there, right? Over there in the commentary. But the interesting thing comes out from the Tosfot is like this, right? That the Tosfot concludes, after discussing this matter, concludes over the Tosfot, is that when a person studies all day, like Rabbi Akiva did, for 24 years, for sure a person like that can become really a gadol. So what does that mean? The rabbi learned from there, he taught us from this Tosfot, something interesting. He said, you know what? You see from this Tosfot, that a person learns every day, even though he started out with zero. He started out at point, point blank. There's nothing, he had nothing. He didn't even know how to read. So he says even a person like that can become a gadol, and it's assured. In other words, if a person will study all day and night, for several, many years, several and many, we have to do many years. Several is not enough. For sure you'll become a gadol. It's like a given, That's what says. So what do you see from there? You see from there that a person really learns Torah all day and night, like the rabbi did. He's assured that he's going to become gadol. He's going to become a great chacham, the great rabbi of the generation. He's going to become like that. This is the way it is. So this exactly was the secret of the rabbi. It's very simple. The secret was the special sauce that he had. To attain his greatness was the fact that he was totally devoted to Torah like that. Non-stop, with no interruptions. There's also amazing things that I heard from other people as well regarding the rabbi's amazing propensity to learn Torah like that. They say that when they were young, the rabbi was a student in Ovadia Yosef, one of the great yeshivot, Sephardic yeshivot in Jerusalem, the original one. Right? What happened was that that yeshiva, they had like financial problems, and so they decided to close the yeshiva and to go to the Kibbutz Tzadikim, to the graves of the righteous in the north, in Eretz Israel. And over there in the north, in the Galilee, there's the Kibbutz Tzadikim, the graves of the righteous over there. So he went over there. They went over there to pray, that they should have enough sustenance to keep the yeshiva open. They shouldn't close. So they told the rabbi was also there at that time. He was a young student, and they told him. They said, can you come with us also? Pray with us together that the yeshiva shouldn't close. So he says, I'm sorry, I cannot go. I said, I'm studying. I'm too busy with that. I'm going to have to lose like 2 weeks of learning to come with you guys over there. So he refused to go. So he said, right, that he told his son that when they came back, like 10 days later from all that trip, going here, going there, Safat, MARAN, blah, 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 all these places where the righteous are buried, the righteous rabbis, the big rabbis, the rabbi was also already, right, at that point, like in 1 week, he was finished already, like almost finished Bava Kama, one of the great, big Talmudic tractates. He almost finished it, right, from beginning to end. So that's the way he did, right? When they were going and praying in the cemeteries, the rabbi was sitting and learning. The same thing, by the way, they say something amazing, which I was told by his son, Rabbi Yosef. He told us that when the rabbi was like 40 years old, until that point, he never went to the north, as we said, right, to pray over there, the Kibbutz Tzadikim, the graves of the Chachamim. A lot of people used to go there to pray over there. They should get salvation from that. The rabbi never went because of Bitul Torah, because he considered to be that he's missing Torah time. He's losing Torah time because of that. So what happened was that one day, right, they say that there was this Kabbalist over there who was living in the north, and he told people, some rabbis, he told them, he said, yeah, I had a dream, It says, in my dream, Rabbi Ovadia was coming here to MARAN, to Tzfat, to pray over here with the Kibbutz Tzadikim, to MARAN. That's where I was. The Shimon ben Yochai's grave over there. So he was coming over there to pray with us. He's going to be here right very soon to pray with us together. So they came and told the rabbi, about this, that this Kabbalist has a dream like this, that you're going to come over there to the graves of the righteous and pray together with us over there. So they came to him and they said, you have to go because, he had a dream like that about you. So the rabbi told him, says, if this guy had a dream, I have to waste my time, and miss my Torah learning. He says, what kind of thing is that? They couldn't convince him to go. At that time, he was like 40 years old, and they couldn't convince him. They said, no, I'm going to sit and study Torah. I'm not going to go there. This guy had a dream, because he had a dream, I have to waste my time. That's what he told them, right? So what happened was that there came more rabbis, Chacham ben Tzimon Shaul, who was his Chavruta, one of the great rabbis of the generation as well. He also came, and he told the rabbi, told them, they came with a car, and they passed by, and they said, no, come on, you coming? We're going to the north now to pray over there, just like this Kabbalist dreamt about you, right? So the rabbi told him, he says, no, I'm not coming. He says, I'm sorry, but it's going to be too much of a waste for me, I'm going to lose one day, one whole day of learning. He says, what am I going to do? I'm now in the middle of studying a certain topic, a certain sugya. If I lose this, he says, I'm going to lose my trend of thought and everything's going to be gone. So you know what they told him? They guaranteed him one thing, these two rabbis. They came there, pick him up. They said, we promise you, if you come to pray with us over there, all the way that we're going in the car, we'll all be studying Torah together, like we'll be talking Torah non-stop. He said, we promise you, and we're going to talk about the topic that you want to talk about. So once they told him that, they assuaged him, they calmed his fears down, So then he agreed to go with them. So they said that was the first time that he ever went to the north over there, to Kibbutz Tzadikim, to the cemeteries over there. Why is that? Because he was totally devoted to Torah. He never wanted to go to these things. Never. It wasn't. Another story they told us, the Rabbi Ovadia, very similar, connected to all this story. They said that, he says, even from a lot of people, obviously, most people, when their parents, pass away, what happens is that they go to visit their graves. At least on the York side, right, on the death anniversary. I'm sure you do that too, right? So, what happens is, right, that the Rabbi told us, he said, I personally, he says, I don't go to my parents' graves. I don't go. Not to my father, not to my mother. So he explained to us why he doesn't do that. So he said the truth is that he brought the Gaon Levina, right? The Gaon Levina used to say, they used to say to Gaon Levina, his disciples, you should go and visit the grave of your mother, because she's going to get a lot of nachat, a lot of good feelings from you coming there. So Gaon Levina used to tell them like this: says, she's going to get nachat, she's going to get good feelings, but I'm going to be harmed by that. What's the reason why he said he's going to be harmed? Because besides the fact that you're missing Torah learning by going to the cemetery, there's also the issue that there's a lot of ghosts and ghouls and demons over there, bad influences. So what they do is,
I haven't been back there since you told me that.
right, interesting. So what they do is that when you come there, they like cling to you, they attack you, So it's not really a very good place to be spiritually wise. It's not good for your neshama to be there, unless you absolutely have to be there.
Where are the demons coming from?
They're coming from heaven, but they gather there because there's a lot of impurity there, There's a lot of impurity with the dead bodies. There's impurity.
Yeah.
They gather over there, all kinds of things like this.
It's not the spirits of the dead.
No, we're not talking about that. We're talking, there's also that too, by the way.
Yeah.
Dead people who coming there, all kinds of demons, all kinds of harmful agents are coming there. So the Gaon Levina likes to say, I'm going to get harmed. My mother's going to feel good maybe if I come there, but I'm going to get harmed by that. So I don't want to go. So the rabbi told me, he says, that's also what I do. He says, I don't go to my parents' graves, on their death anniversary, on their yard side, because of this reason. He said, I don't go. That's the bottom line. So, therefore, the rabbi said, he told us, he said, the best thing to do, on the death anniversary of your parents, if you want to elevate their souls and give them good spiritual elevation. Mm-hmm. If you want to elevate them, what should you do? Not go there to the graveyard. He said you should learn Mishnayot, learn some Torah. If you're going to learn some Torah in there for the elevation of their souls, of your parents, if you're their child, if you're their son, you learn for them, especially around the Yortzeit time, it's going to elevate them much, much more. Also to say Kaddish, right? To learn Torah, to say Kaddish. This is what I do. He told us. So that's he laid down the rule for us. But the point was like this, right? That besides the fact that they harm you over there when you go to the graveyard, it's harmful. There's also the Bitul Torah. You're losing Torah time.
Yeah.
It takes 3 hours to drive up there in Israel. From Jerusalem to drive up there, it's a 3-hour trip. 3 hours back, 3 hours back and forth, right? You lose, the whole day's gone. It's the whole day's shot,
And for what?
So, right. No, I mean, there's some benefit to that. But the point is, right, that 6 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours of Bitul Torah, of losing Torah time, it's not worth it. And this is the reason why the rabbi never went even to his parents.
Mm-hmm.
No? So he says, Lemaaseh, practically speaking, he says, you should only go to the Kibbutz Tzaddikim, to the righteous, the big rabbis, because they help you when you go, they pray for you. That's the reason why the custom is to go to the righteous graves, the Kibbutz Tzaddikim. So he says, only if you like close by, and it won't be too much time, so you can go, you can hop in, let's say you're passing by the interchange where the graveyard is over there, the highway, and you just happen to be like, right there, just get off the exit for 2 minutes, and jump in. And he says that you can do, but besides that, right, he says, but for his parents, he doesn't go. He didn't go. We're talking about Kibbutz Tzaddikim, right, the graves of the big rabbis, because they can help you a lot, these rabbis. They can help you because they pray for you. When they see you, it says in the Zohar Kadosh, they already know what your problem is, and they pray for you right away. You don't even have to ask them anything. The fact that they see you there is already enough.
We don't have a similar place here, huh?
You know where they go, right? They go to the Rebbe's, the St. Albans. The Rebbe is buried over there. They go over there. Yeah, Lubavitch, yeah. That's where they go. Ask Chachamaron, he'll tell you about that. He'll tell you about this. They have a whole situation going on there. They have a whole operation. You know what it is, right? They have a shul there. They have minyanim. They have prayers. It's like a shul. It's like a. Yeah.
I'm not sure how authentic his spirit would.
So now, why do I tell you this, right? All this because the truth is that many people think, that it's a big deal to go to the cemeteries, this and that. But when it causes you too much bitul Torah, too much Torah time, you're losing. It's not worth it, You're losing more than you're gaining. So therefore, it's not really a big inyan to go. I personally, by the way, I can tell you an interesting story. I personally, as I said, right, as you told me, once you heard this from me, you didn't go. I also, when I heard this from the rabbi, I didn't go myself as well.
Yeah.
I had to go to my father, because when he first passed away 4 years ago, I had to go like once or twice. I had to be there.
That's not really why I don't go.
Yeah.
I haven't gone. I learned from you that once they're gone,
yeah,
they're in another world.
They're in another world. That's
They're
true.
in another world.
But you know what it is, that regarding that, what you're asking about, what you're talking about, there's three elements of the soul, right? Three portions.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one portion that stays there by the grave. It's called the nefesh.
Oh, is there?
The lower part, right? And the upper parts go to the heavens. Go to Gan Eden.
Yeah.
That's
So
the way
it
gets divided up.
Is there anything productive by visiting the nefesh?
So I'll tell you something interesting, right? I'll tell you something really interesting. That I personally, right, as I told you, once I heard this from the rabbi, I never went to graveyards anymore, cemeteries, except when my father passed away. I had to go. There was no choice, So twice I had to go. There was no choice. But now I don't go anymore. So what happens is, right, that the rabbi told us that what do you call it? What do I want to say? That as we said, right, there's no when you have no choice. Yeah. So he told us that there's a way to do it, though. What happened was that with me, I don't go, as I told you, I don't go anymore. So one day I had to go to the north. This was like 5 years ago. I was in Israel. I had to go to the north, not because to go to cemeteries, to meet somebody over there. I had a meeting, so I had to drive up there with a bus. I took a bus, about 2.5 hours, whatever. So what happens is, right, there's something really weird. The bus was supposed to drop me off, I thought, in a different place, but it dropped me off right where the kever of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was, the grave of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, which is in MARAN, one of the big chachamim, the Kabbalists of all time. So what happened was that I didn't go into the graveyard because I told you I don't go. But what happened was that I just passed by there, just happened to go by there. And then something interesting happened also. Once I had finished my meeting with this person that I had to meet, another amazing thing happened. They dropped me off at the other cemetery, where there's the other famous cemetery. All the big tzaddikim are buried there, in Tzfat. That's where I was going. I was going to Tzfat. So Tzfat, over there's a big cemetery. They dropped me off right there. They said, okay, here, we'll go here and do what you want to do. So I was supposed to take a bus from there. So what happened was I passed by there too. I didn't go in. I didn't go into the cemetery. But I saw it. I saw it, I passed by, and I left. So the amazing thing, you know what it was, the amazing thing? The amazing thing was that once I passed by those two cemeteries, I had like a big problem that I was going through, at that time. And all my problem was solved, Once I went there, like in a couple of weeks, everything got freed up. So this is exactly what the Zohar Kadosh tells you. It says Zohar Kadosh that when you don't have to, when you go to the graves of the tzaddikim, of the righteous, you don't have to actually go in there, and in the cemetery and go close to the grave. They already see you, even from far away. They already see you, and they know what your problem is. How do they know what your problem is? You know how they know? Because as we said, right, the neshama is divided up into three parts. So what happens is that there's like a GPS going on there, between the higher neshama, which is in Shamayim, and the lower neshama, which is in the grave. So one tells the other what the problem is. They know up there what the problems are. So this one tells this one, and then when they see you, they pray for you right away. This is the idea. You don't have to ask them anything. There's nothing to ask. They already know what your problem is. So that's exactly what happened to me. That when I went there. So why am I telling you this? Because the best way to do it, the truth is, if you want to go into the cemetery. By the way, this is one of the good things about the rabbi. You know what it is? He's buried right next to the fence of the cemetery. So you don't have to actually go. You don't have to actually go into the cemetery to see the rabbi, the grave. You can just go by the fence, which is outside, and you can pray right there. You can, so you don't have to go in. He's right next to the wall. So you don't really have to go in. So that's the best thing to do, If a person doesn't really want to go into the cemetery because he feels he's going to be harmed or whatever, just go by the fence, and they will see you anyway. They know already what your problem is. They know what to pray for you already. You don't have to ask them nothing. It's enough just to pass by there. That's exactly what happened with me, So it's an amazing thing, right? So what's the point over here, right? I'm telling you all this because to tell you that the Rabbi Shalom, Until he was 40 years old, he never went to Kibbutz Tzadikim, the cemeteries, all the things he avoided. What's the reason why he avoided all these things? Because he wanted to study Torah. He didn't want to be bothered with all these things. For him, it was like, something which is not, just not natural. It's not the way to live like that. Another thing I was told by Rabbi Zuz, the rabbi was so devoted to Torah. I'll tell you how devoted he was. Said Rabbi Zuz, until he was 30 years old, he said the rabbi never saw a newspaper in his life. Never read like any news. We read it on our phones. We have everything on our phone. This happened, that happened. Everything is on the internet. But the rabbi didn't have internet. In those times, there was no internet. But also, he didn't even have basic news. He didn't read anything. So he told us, he says, until he was 30 years old, he never saw a newspaper in his life. When a person grows up like that, when he is in such a pure atmosphere like that, where nothing from the outside comes in, all you have is Torah. There's nothing else you have. So this is exactly the reason why the rabbi was so advanced, in Torah, because he was totally devoted. There was nothing else he was doing. There was no other activity going on there. Even all the outside influences were just totally blocked out. That's the way the rabbi lived his life. So, right, when you live a life like this, I'll give you also another example of the rabbi's greatness, his devotion to Torah. That what we saw was like this: that when we towards the end of the rabbi's life, he was already weak and frail, relatively speaking. He was still a strong man. He was very strong. But he was already 90 years old, getting up to 90, So what happened was that he wanted to write a book about laws of Shabbat, Rabbi Ovadia. So he wanted to finish the whole laws of Shabbat from beginning to end, from A to Z. So what happened was he started writing, and as he started writing, he started to isolate himself from the community, People couldn't get in to see him anymore. It was hard to get in. You have to fight your way, bring a Sherman tank, a shotgun, the wall, everything was blocked, the whole thing was blocked. Everybody was blocked. So what happened was that because we couldn't get in, we were getting mad sometimes. We have to see the rabbi, ask him a question, get a blessing from him. How can it be that we're going to live like that without seeing the rabbi once in a while? It's very hard for a person who's devoted to being the Talmid, being the disciple of the rabbi, to be like that. So, but the rabbi, his intention was something else. He wanted to devote his whole time, at that time, to finish these books that he was writing on the laws of Shabbat. So he was saying like this, I'm doing a race for time. He knew. He was racing for time. What does it mean, racing for time? That means that he knew he didn't have much longer to live. He felt that his body, he was getting sick, sicknesses, hospital visits. You know how it is, right? When the body starts to fail, you feel it already, right? You feel that you don't have much time left anymore. That's the way he felt about himself. He knew it already. So he said like this, I don't have much time left. He says, I have to finish these books on Shabbat. He says, you know why? Because he says, if I don't write them, there's nobody else in the generation who can write these books on Shabbat. Nobody else has the knowledge that I can do these books like. Nobody else can copy that. Nobody else can take on that project. So he said, therefore, he says, I'm going to race for time, race with time and try to finish it off. Not to take too many people to come in to see me, to take visitors, all kinds of things. Once he started to do that, people were coming in much less to his sphere, to his abode. So what happened was that in the end he was very, very right. What does that mean? That he died in the middle of writing these books. He knew that he had very limited time, so he managed to write 6 volumes on the laws of Shabbat. Can you imagine? Still very, very respectable. But he had still more to go. But nevertheless, he wasn't able to finish everything. At the age of 93, right? That's it. That's when it stopped. He was still writing the books, but he couldn't continue anymore. So they put out the 6 volumes, as they were, until that last day that he was writing. That's the last thing that he did. That's the idea, So the rabbi did what he could. He knew that he had limited time, and this is the way he lived his life, and everything was for the sake of Torah, for the sake of learning Torah. I'll give you another example, right? I don't want to get too long, but I'll give you a couple of other examples of how the rabbi was devoted to Torah, right? They say, so I personally saw something amazing, by the way. Amazing story I can tell you. That, what happened was that we used to pray Shachrit at the rabbis at 7 o'clock in the morning. This was the schedule. 8 o'clock we were finished, 1 hour. So what happened was that at 8 o'clock he used to take people questions. He would sit in his office, people would come in, one by one, who had an appointment, and ask a question or get a blessing, whatever it is, right? So everybody would, would try to come in there, to get in there. It was like 10, 15 minutes. He would stay there, and take questions and blessings and so forth, meetings with people. So what happened was that there was one rabbi who wanted to come from a different town. He didn't live in Jerusalem. He lived in the north. So as I told you, right, it's like a 3-hour drive from there to come down to Jerusalem. So he made an appointment with the rabbi in the morning, 8 o'clock, That means he must have left his house like 5:30 to get there 8. You know what I mean? Very, very early. Like before dawn. You know what I mean? So he gets there, and the rabbi already had finished his session with the people, He was done. So once he was done, he used to go upstairs, and that was it, right? Go to study Torah. Once he left, you couldn't see him anymore. That was it, right? So he waited, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it was. This guy didn't show up, this rabbi. He doesn't show up. He goes upstairs, starts learning the rabbi. Once the rabbi started learning, you couldn't bother him anymore. That was it, right? It was finished. That day was already gone. So what happened was like this, right? He showed up late. I personally saw this myself. So he shows up late, the rabbi. This rabbi coming from the north, and he tells the Tzvi Chakak, who was the attendant of the rabbi. He tells Tzvi, he says, okay, I'm a little late, Can I still see the rabbi? He came like 20 minutes late. What can you do, He's driving traffic. What can you do? That's the way life is. So Tzvi Chakak told him, his attendant, the rabbi's attendant, tells him, he says, too late already, you can't see the rabbi now. If he went upstairs, once he starts learning, he doesn't see anybody. Until the evening. That's it, you're done. So he told him, he says, he begged him, he says, please, I drove all the way from the north, this is like 3-hour drive. Let me go up and see the rabbi. So he says, no way, tells him. You cannot see the rabbi anymore. So can you imagine this rabbi? He was a rabbi himself, rabbi of a certain town. The whole town is under his wings, He comes over there, the rabbi wouldn't let him in. 3 hours of driving, he had to drive back 3 hours. He told him, no, come back tomorrow, he tells him. So he tells him, can you imagine? So after 3 hours of driving, 3 hours of going back, he didn't see the rabbi. Because once the rabbi went upstairs to study Torah, nobody could bother him anymore. That was it. It was finished. There was no more hope anymore to see the rabbi that day. And that's the idea. So it's another way we see, right, that the rabbi was very devoted to Torah study. Once he went upstairs, that was it, right? You couldn't see him anymore. There was no way to catch him anymore. This is the way the rabbi was. He was so vehement with his time. I'll tell you another story. I finish with this. We used to pray also Arvit over there at the rabbi's minyan. I used to go especially to pray over there Arvit sometimes. So even though I could have prayed in yeshiva, but I wanted to be with the rabbi. I wanted to see him, So what happened was that he would come down sometimes a little bit late, like it was supposed to start at 8 o'clock, Arvit. Sometimes it comes down 8:10, 8:15, So you figure, like, why is the rabbi coming late? He lives right upstairs. Like, what? It takes 15 minutes to get down the elevator. What's the story, right? He's only 1 floor above. So then, what happened was that Moshe, his son, the rabbi's son, Rav Moshe, he told us actually what was going on over there, Why would the rabbi come sometimes late to the minyan? So the rabbi would be like studying, during the evening, studying. And so Moshe would come, and like tap him on the back, okay, the rabbi, now it's time for Arvit, So the rabbi would get really upset, because he had to stop him learning. So we tell him, leave me alone. He says, I'm studying now. He says, no, Abba, you gotta come to Arvit. It's already 8 o'clock. No, I can't, leave me alone. He couldn't get off the Torah, like he couldn't get off. He was so glued to the Torah, you couldn't get him off the Torah, He was a man that was totally devoted. And when you told him to stop, even though it was a good reason, he couldn't stop. They say another thing, by the way, which is amazing. Once the rabbi started learning Torah, as we said, right? Once he went upstairs and started learning in the morning, he didn't even notice anybody anymore. Like he wouldn't even talk to anybody, even the people who were there. Like walking around. He was like totally a different world. Never looked up. You want to hear another amazing story about this? We'll finish off with this one. There's no end to these stories. I can tell you all night these stories. There's no end to them. Another amazing story, which we're going to make you laugh. Okay. What happened was that actually there's like 2 stories like this, but they're related to each other. One day, right? This was like about 7 years ago. So what happened was that, or 8 years ago, something like that. So what happened was that Bibi at that time, was thinking to bomb Iran because they were making nuclear weapons. So they were like deliberating about this, and then the cabinet, yes to bomb them, no to bomb them. Obama was, like trying to stop them. It was a whole deal over there, right? You remember that those expressions, right? The chicken, chicken. You remember that, right? The whole story, right? So Bibi was like trying to figure out what to do. So he decided to go and consult with the rabbi about this, to nuke them or not, to bomb them or not to bomb them. So he goes to Rabbi Ovadia, he said to consult with him. So he tells Eli Yishai, right, who was the rabbi's man in the Knesset, he says, I want to go see the rabbi tonight, can I come over? So he says, yeah, okay, but he says, you have to come late night, because he's learning, studying. Come like 2 o'clock in the morning, you can see him. Okay? So Bibi comes, like his entourage, cars, motorcade, the sharpshooters, Shin Bet people, Shabak, Tali Jamati, the whole thing, right? So he comes over there, and they covered the whole place, police, escorts, blah, 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 When he comes, it's like a whole commotion, So he comes upstairs to the rabbi's chamber, the house, the apartment. And the rabbi was still learning, that the time also. It was like, past midnight already, into the wee hours, right? So Bibi comes into the room, he brings him in, Elisha brings him into the room. So Bibi comes in there, and the rabbi, is like sitting and learning still, So he just like, Bibi like looks at him, looks at the rabbi. True story, right? So the rabbi doesn't notice that he's there. So he's just like standing there, Bibi, So Elisha tells him, the rabbi's Ben, the politician, he tells him, he says, should I interrupt the rabbi to speak with you? Because he doesn't know that you're here. You're right next to him. He can't even see you. So Bibi tells Elisha, he tells him, he says, no, he says, don't interrupt him, let him finish first. He was like humble, he had humility, He says, let the rabbi finish first, So he's standing there like waiting, So they said, right, that it took like the rabbi 15 minutes, to look up to see him, He couldn't see him for 15 minutes. He was studying all this time. After 15 minutes, he looks up, from the book. He says, oh, how are you? Come here. He brought him in like that's the way it was, right? I'll tell you another funny story, and we'll finish with this, right? There's no end to these stories. So, who was the prime minister before Bibi, right? It was Ehud Barak, After he did his first term, then Barak took over. Remember Barak, right? This lowlife, right? So what happens is that Barak, he was like a very arrogant man, like he was a big general, so he always like to tell stories, how brave he was, like courageous, whatever. So he said one time when he was prime minister, he called the rabbi on the phone, to consult with him about something. So he calls the rabbi up. Barak. No, not Sharon, no, Barak, yeah. So Barak calls, this was like in 2000, around that time. And he calls the rabbi, and he was the prime minister at that time. So, they were supposed to have like a discussion about something, So once they finished the discussion, he started like bragging about himself, like, oh yeah, I did this over there in the army, like Brakhovda, So he starts bragging about himself. So they said, right, it's a true story. They said the rabbi, once he heard that he was bragging, like started bragging. So what does he do? He puts down the phone, on the bed, and just like continued learning, just like left him hanging. He left him hanging. He didn't want to hear the stupid bragging that he was doing, So he just like put it down, let him keep talking. He didn't hang up the phone, just put it down, Okay, have a good night. He didn't tell him nothing, just put it down. So the rabbi couldn't stand arrogance, He couldn't stand people like that, who like to brag about themselves.
Yeah.
I have what to do with my life. I have Torah to be devoted to. I don't want to listen to you bragging.
Bullshit.
Yeah, right, exactly. About your army stories. Who cares about you? So he just put the phone down. He continued studying. That's the way it was. Okay, so the bottom line is like this, right? That we have to learn from all these stories that a person has to be very devoted to Torah time. Don't waste your time. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave us limited time in this world, so we have to accomplish Torah. So what does that mean? That the men have to study Torah as much as possible. The women are not commanded to study Torah so much like the men, but they have to help their husbands, or to help their fathers, to help their sons to study Torah. It says the Gemara, how do the women get Olam Haba? How do they get the world to come? because they don't really have a mitzvah of Torah study. So they have to help their husbands, they have to help their sons, they have to help their fathers to learn Torah. And by that way, they also get the credit of learning Torah for themselves. By the way, the amazing things like this, right? The women get more than the men. Why is that? It says the Gemara that women get like threefold, fourfold than men do. Why? Because they help their father, when they help their husband, and they help their children. So they get 3 times more than the men do, because they're helping 3 people. That's the idea. So when you help others, and you help a lot of people, you get credit for all of them. That's the idea. So when a person supports Torah like that, by helping them with the physical labor, or with the support, or financial support, whatever it is, that he gets credit for helping all of them. So which is a very, very, very great amount of credit. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen. We should have the zechut b'ezrat Hashem to build the Bet HaMikdash, rebuild the Bet HaMikdash, and to see all the great Chachamim, Rabbi Akiva and MARAN Rabbi Ovadia and all of them, the Tchiat HaMetim that will be resurrected from the dead, and we'll have the Biat HaMashiach, b'menav v'amenu, amen ve'amen. Chazak Baruch, be blessed, wealth, health, and happiness to all Am Yisrael, amen ve'amen. Chazak Baruch.
Amen.
And victory for the president, B'ezrat Hashem. He's going to be reelected, B'ezrat Hashem.
I saw somebody wrote you back a comment.